Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to this show on the Simsbury school system, a show which goes behind the scenes to help you learn more about our schools. This is our first show of the new school year, and by now the kids and the teachers are already hard at work. Today we're going to focus on Henry James Memorial School, Simsbury's middle school, or what we used to call in the old days junior high school. Middle school or junior high school, whatever you call it, those words call up, for many of us, bad memories of our own terrible middle school years. And even most parents of students in that age group don't envy the teachers who teach there. Thank God, there are some people who like the challenge. Here to talk with us about Henry James today is one of those people, the principal, Brian White, who's starting his second year here. Welcome, Brian. I'm so delighted that you're here today and helping us kick off the 2013-2014 school year.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're starting your second year here, and I'm sure that there are many people in town who don't know much about you. So I wanted to start out, before we start talking about the school and the system at Henry James, I wanted to talk about your background, where you're from, where you went to college, and where you taught before you got here. So just sort of your resume.
Sure. Well, I'm very happy to be going into my second year at Henry James. Previously, I was an administrator in East Hartford. In the East Hartford public school system, I was an assistant principal for 2 years at Sunset Ridge, which was an elementary academy for the fine and performing arts and world languages.
In East Hartford?
In East Hartford. Prior to that, I taught in Windsor, Connecticut at Sage Park Middle School. I was a 7th grade social studies teacher, and I was also an assistant principal there for a year. So that's a summary of my professional background. I attended UConn for both my bachelor's and master's degrees.
So I assume you're a Connecticut native.
I'm a Connecticut native. I grew up in Wallingford.
Oh, very nice. So in my little introduction, I touched on the fact that a lot of people have very, very bad memories of their middle school years. What was it that, well, number one, did you have bad memories? And what was it that made you interested in teaching or being principal of a school that governed those years with all those adolescents and all their problems?
Sure. I had a very positive experience as a middle school student growing up in Wallingford, and upon entering the field of education, one of the first opportunities I had to teach was at the middle level. And so it was really that experience that I found I enjoyed, and I wanted to continue working with that age group. And so over the course of working with middle schoolers and teaching that age level, I eventually had opportunities to become an administrator at that same age level. So I do regard myself as a middle level person. That's where my professional experiences have been in education, and it's where I'm happy. So
you said that you had a good experience. I mean, I remember seventh grade. My own 7th grade experience was the worst year of my life. I was ostracized. There was a clique where there was a boy who called me a dog, and he got angry at people if they talked to me. This was bullying a long time ago before we called it bullying. So what were your positive experiences, and what helped make them that way?
Well, I think it was just having opportunities to be involved in many ways in the school. One of the things I think we do very well at Henry James is we provide our students with many opportunities, both curricular and extracurricular, to get involved and really have connections with the school. And I think that's very important at all levels of education, but particularly for middle school students. Developmentally, it's a time where kids are going through lots of changes, and so I think the stronger the connection to the school and the community, the more support we can provide students as they go through those middle years.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the adolescents are trying to form their own identities, and a lot of that happens by sort of ostracizing people. I mean, that's what happened to me. So, and I guess can lead to bullying. So I'm imagining that you have figured out a way, or you did figure out a way as a teacher to sort of try and deal with that.
Sure. And I think working with students of all ages, it really comes down to relationships. I think it's important to foster an environment where it's trusting, where it's supportive, both in the classroom or, in the case of my current role, school-wide. We're very fortunate at Henry James to have what I would regard as a very positive school climate. However, with a lot of trends that we're seeing at large in education, concerns that are raised frequently in the media around issues of bullying, internet safety. We're responding to a lot of those concerns by offering programming this year just to really inform students and their families about really the challenges of growing up in this age.
I just heard, this is completely off the topic, I just heard some report yesterday, in the last few days, I can't remember where it was, where somebody said if you intervene very quickly in a bullying situation, whether it's in school or in life, that it stops if an adult or if somebody calls you on it.
Sure, and I think that's the important piece. It's that prompt and appropriate level of response, not just to take corrective measures, but I think supportive measures, and particularly when you're working with students, it's important to support students on both sides of that issue. Education's a big part of our approach, informing students if a poor choice is made, what the impacts of that decision are in the hopes of preventing future incidences from occurring.
So this whole concept of middle school or junior high school started in when I was in school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in New York City. That was in the mid-50s, and then in the 60s it became more a middle school concept, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th grades, or 7th and 8th grades. I have read that there are a lot of people who are questioning whether we should be doing that. Do you have any opinion on that, that whole middle school concept? Is it a good thing to separate those kids?
I think the middle school concept works very well. At the beginning of the program, I shared that I regard myself as a middle-level person. One of the true strengths of a middle school model is what we refer to as the teaming structure. And when you think about the transition from elementary school to middle school, and it's really during those middle years that we're working to prepare students to be successful high schoolers, the benefit of the team is essentially creating smaller learning communities within the school. So as many students leave their smaller elementary settings to a much larger middle school, by utilizing the teaming structure, which is typically when you hear people refer to the middle school philosophy, or what is the distinction between a junior high and a middle school, it really does come down to that teaming model. It provides the benefits of that smaller community, even in a larger physical building.
So what does that mean? So you've got kids coming to Henry James from the 5 elementary school systems?
Yes.
And so do you mix them all up in 7th grade? Do you keep them in an area of the building that are close together? How do you handle that?
So as students are assigned to teams, what that really means is for their core academic classes, there's a group of teachers who share responsibility for those students. And so that's a primary benefit in that you have, again, shared responsibility for a smaller number of students as opposed to an entire grade level. The other advantage to the team structure is there's a scheduling component to it. We do provide time during the day for teachers to work in support of each other and their work with kids. And so our teachers have the opportunity to collaborate professionally around effective instructional practices, effective approaches to the curriculum, and even in their individual work with students and families, they have that time for that level of collaboration. And so professionally there's a support structure for teachers, and then for students the obvious benefit is that smaller setting that's within the larger school. And so those are really the 2 primary benefits to the team model.
I personally think that the opportunity for teachers to communicate about certain students and how they're working with them and share some thoughts is a wonderful idea. I actually taught school myself. I taught elementary school, and my best year of teaching was a year when I had a full-time volunteer. And it was so wonderful to be able to have another adult's view on the children I was dealing with. So I think that's an absolutely great thing. So you came from East Hartford, which was a true middle school, I think 4th or 5th through 8th grade. Is it different?
It was a little different. The school where I came from in East Hartford was a 4th through 6th school. 4th
through 6.
Correct.
Okay.
And the year that I came to that school, it was actually brand new. And so it was a theme-based school, and it emphasized the study of art, world language, and music. And so those themes were integrated into the curriculum. So it was grades 4 through 6, approximately 420 students. So East Hartford has a lot of urban problems. How did it feel coming here from there? I mean,
how different was it?
Different in some ways. I mean, not different in others. I think fundamentally children are children, and so as an educator in working with students, whether those students live in East Hartford or Simsbury, again, I think a lot of the fundamental approaches you take in the classroom as a teacher or even as a building administrator are the same. The priority is the students, and so it's just a matter of responding to the level of need, whatever that looks like in the community where you happen to be.
So you're now in your second year, as I mentioned in my introduction, and I'm sure that you've had some time to reflect on that first year and how did it go, and what were you most proud of?
Well, I think it went very well. In terms of what I'm most proud of, I probably most proud of the fact that I was able to transition into this role as easily as I was able to, and I couldn't have done that without the support of the people around me. So I feel very fortunate to work in this community. I've had a great deal of support from my faculty as I've transitioned into the new role. I've had a great deal of support from other administrators in district as well as the central office, and so we're very fortunate to have a great system here in town. And I would say, just being able to work with the people who are here every day is something I'm very proud to be able to do.
You faced some major challenges last year. We lost Assistant Principal Patty Lou Peters, and that must have been extraordinarily difficult. And now you're in your second year. You have a new Assistant Principal, Jeff Pinney, who I had the pleasure of interviewing. So that must have been extremely difficult for you and the faculty. Oh,
sure. I mean, the loss of Mrs. Peters was really devastating for our school community, and I would say the community at large. Mrs. Peters, having worked in district for a number of years, really had the ability to impact a lot of different people in very positive ways. I feel very fortunate to have had the time I did with her. I was able to learn a lot, and I just had a real profound respect for her, not only as a professional but as a human being. And so I am grateful for the time we had to work together. Mr. Pinney is very excited to be the new assistant principal of Henry James. He's off to a great start. Mr. Pinney, as you know, or some of the viewers may not know, that he was a teacher at Simsbury High School prior to accepting his current position. He's been very enthusiastic, very excited to be there, and so far we're off to a great start, so we're glad to have him.
That's terrific. We're going to take a short break right now to show you a public service announcement made by a Simsbury High School student last year. And when we come back, we're going to talk about after-school activities at Henry James and a new program with Hartford Stage. And also, we're going to try and answer the question, just what are Common Core standards? So don't go away. Welcome back. We've just seen a video made by James Martin last year when he was a Simsbury High School senior. The PSA won third prize in last year's Hartford Area Cable Television Advisory Council, HACTAC, contest. Okay, so now we're back with Brian White, the principal of Henry James, and I've heard that you have a new theater program for 8th graders and something about a relationship with Hartford Stage. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're very pleased this year to offer a new program that's based around the Hartford Stage. This is an after-school theater program, and it's really a partnership with the Hartford Stage. And so students have an opportunity to explore concepts in theater, and over the course of this program, we're also going to be making curricular connections, many of which are literary in nature, to the subject matter that's taught. And so through exploring different themes in theater, different concepts in theater, students will not only be learning about the stage, but also making concepts to many of the things they read about in their classes.
So tell me, you touched in the beginning about the importance of activities at the school for this age. when I was at that age, there was nothing for kids after school. So tell me, but I lived in New York City and there was a lot going on, but in Simsbury there's less. So what is it that, aside from this new theater program, one thing you didn't answer was what's the relationship with Hartford Stage? How is that working?
Well, so the Hartford Stage is working alongside of our staff to facilitate this program. So it's really a program that is offered through Hartford Stage, and they send folks out and work alongside our staff to instruct kids around concepts in theater. So again, it's really a partnership between the Hartford Stage and the Simsbury faculty.
Okay, so now I interrupted myself. Now let's go on and talk about a little bit what else is available for these middle school students at Henry James.
Sure. So I would say one of the strengths of our school, one of our true strengths, is in our extracurricular offerings. We offer a multitude of after-school programming, and truthfully almost too many to list from memory. We have a really great approach at Henry James by which students are empowered to propose clubs or activities, and so if there's not already an offering that appeals to them, there's a process in which they can actually approach our administration and our faculty and make proposals about different ideas for clubs and activities. Our activities range from intramural or athletic type activities to programs in the arts and music, many cultural-based activities associated with world language, and just a number of clubs and activities that are specific to individual interests in our student body. So we really do strive to create as many opportunities as possible for students to make connections with the school outside of the classroom.
So how do you handle the loners, the kids who are not joiners?
Sure. We have a very high percentage of students who do participate. It typically exceeds 80% by year. With that being said, there are some students who do struggle to make connections, and so we had talked about the benefits of teaming. One of those benefits is there's a support system in place for those students, and so there's typically no fewer than 5 adults working in conjunction with a team who would be working in support of those students, identifying the individual needs of those students and working to coordinate school resources so that students do feel they have a place and feel supported when they're there.
So how does that work after school? Is there a late bus, or do parents pick their kids up late, or how does that work?
Sure, so there is a late bus. The late bus route is a little different than our regular dismissal bus route, but we do provide transportation, so that way there's really hopefully no issues interfering with students' ability to participate. So as long as there's interest and students are willing to stay and participate, we do provide transportation for them to get home.
Now, intramurals sport, you mentioned intramurals. What kind of sports are available, and how many students participate?
Sure, a fairly high number of students. I mean, off the top of my head, over the course of the year, hundreds. Those activities change often by season, and so the offerings may change from soccer in the fall when the weather's still nice outside to basketball in the winter. However, it's not limited to those 2 sports. It's often a variety of offerings. And so it does vary over the course of the year and often in response to student interest.
Okay, so now I've always felt like, or in recent years, there's this sense of the professionalization of sports among very young children, which I have felt leaves out kids who are not super athletes, but who like to run around. And so how does that work there? I mean, is it really open, or are... It's really open.
It's really open.
So kids who are not good can play soccer or basketball?
Any student who has an interest in participating is welcome.
Okay, so now I touched on the fact that there is something called Common Core Standards coming along, or that is actually being implemented this year. I know they've been adopted by 45 states, and they're supposed to be make education more consistent from state to state and set benchmarks for students in reading and math. But so often that sounds like gobbledygook to me, just sort of bureaucratic speak. What does that mean to you, and how are you preparing at Henry James for this?
Sure. So, you know, and as you stated, I think, you know, generally said it's a national curriculum movement. It's looking to improve levels of rigor as it exists across all content areas in the curriculum. And so it's really an emphasis on the skills you mentioned, reading, writing, and math in particular, not just as those subjects are taught in isolation, but also as those subjects are instructed in various subject areas. The way that we're preparing at Henry James, we're actually preparing in a number of ways. We've offered our teachers a lot of professional development to increase their own awareness of what the Common Core is, the demands of this new approach to curriculum, and most importantly for our teachers, what the instructional implications are. And so as we work to understand what the new requirements of the curriculum will be, our concern is what does this look like in the classroom for our students. And so our teachers, through structures like TEAM, through activities we call professional learning communities here in Simsbury, where teachers have opportunities to meet with their department teachers. So for example, grade 7 science or grade 8 science would have an opportunity to collaborate. Through activities like that, teachers have opportunities to learn about the Common Core and really develop the most effective instructional practices to best support our students in Simsbury. So generally speaking, those are the activities we've really focused on in preparing our teachers.
So I have heard some criticism about Common Core standards, that it sort of makes teachers less creative, that they're sort of focusing on a test or teaching to the test. Is there room for teacher creativity in this?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. With Common Core, we're really looking at levels of rigor in the classroom. We're looking at the nature of learning tasks, our students being appropriately challenged so that they can be the most successful. With that being said, teachers still have a great deal of freedom in how they choose to approach those standards and develop hopefully creative lessons for their own classroom instructional purposes.
So do you encourage creativity among
Absolutely.
teachers? Just an example from my own teaching. I had a professor from a college come and talk about Moby Dick and read chapters of Moby Dick, and that set off a whole sort of lesson on whales in every different way. And I always get the feeling nowadays, teaching to the test, that would not be possible anymore. Is that still possible?
It is still possible, and it's certainly something that we encourage to the greatest extent possible. I think some of the more memorable lessons for students are those that are creative in nature, and so we certainly look for those opportunities whenever
So do you have some
themselves.
of those lessons from your own experience as a social studies teacher?
Well, sure. I think one of the things that as a teacher I worked to do when I taught grade 7 in Windsor was we incorporated a lot of arts-based instruction throughout the various units of study. I taught an ancient world history curriculum, and so it was a very exciting curriculum for the age level. We learned about ancient Rome and ancient Egypt, and so within that course of study there were a lot of opportunities for students to engage in artistic and creative activities which helped to bring the subject matter to life for them. And so when I think back on my teaching experiences with that particular course, some of the more memorable lessons, and when I think of the lessons that excited my students the most, often had some type of a creative component to them.
Okay, it's really interesting. You're very animated when you talk about your own teaching. And do you miss teaching?
Oh, I enjoy teaching. I very much enjoy what I do now. But I've never lost my interest for working in middle school and teaching history. It's still a love of mine.
Okay, so something else that's going on is investment in technology. So what does that mean, and how is that? What impact does that have on students and the school, et cetera?
Sure, and so it's not just Henry James. Really, town-wide, we have a 3-year program in place by which every year we're trying to expand our technology-based resources. We spoke about Common Core, and eventually what will happen is the current test that most people are familiar with at the middle level in Connecticut, the CMT, or Connecticut Mastery Test, is going by the wayside, and what will be used in its place is a new test, often referred to as SBAC.
What?
SBAC, S-B-A-C, which is a Smarter Balanced Assessment.
Smarter Balanced Assessment?
And with this new test, it'll actually occur online. Students will actually take this test using computers. And so one of the requirements is moving to what's called a one-to-one standard. And essentially what that means is having enough computers or devices for students to use in the school. And so we've been increasing our investment in that area. But even aside from the requirements of the testing, in the day-to-day of instruction, technology is increasingly a part of the classroom experience for students. And so at Henry James, we're actually very fortunate to have a lot of excellent resources already. But we are continuing to expand our offerings. So we have 3 computer labs. All of our classrooms have smart boards and projectors. We have several laptop carts, which are essentially carts with 20 laptops that are in classrooms throughout the day. And so kids have a lot of great access to those technologies now. We're continuing that investment by purchasing what's called Google Chromebooks. And these are devices that are very similar to a laptop and allow students all of the basic computing abilities that most laptops offer, access to the internet, and some other abilities. They're not quite as powerful as your standard laptop, but they do allow teachers to perform many of the typical activities with their students that they would use laptops for.
I remember, I believe it was Matt Curtis, our superintendent of schools, when I interviewed him earlier this year. He mentioned that one of the concerns was that a lot of kids, they don't even know how to type. So if they're going to take a test, because they're always using their thumbs. Well, I guess you're working on that problem. So it turns out we've just about run out of time. And in the minute I have left, I wanted to give viewers a chance to learn something more personal about you, where you live, do you have a family, and is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to mention? So first tell me where you live and whether you have a family.
Sure. Well, I reside right here in town, and I do have a family. I have a 15-month-old son at home that we're very proud of.
It's a boy. What's his name?
His name is Devin.
Devin. And so was there anything that you wanted to get across about Henry James and your experience here that we didn't touch on? That
we covered a lot. Again, I really do regard it as a privilege to be a principal of such a high-performing middle school. It's our middle school here in town, which for me is a responsibility that I take very seriously and also enjoy. And I'm just very glad to be there.
Well, thank you, Brian. You've been a delightful guest. I'm so happy to have gotten a chance to meet you, and our time is up. I'd like to thank everyone here at SCTV, our director and camera people, and the office for their help in getting this show on the air. Thanks especially to my guest, Brian White, and I hope that he and everyone else has a wonderful school year. And finally, thank you for joining us. If you missed any part of this show, you can always watch it on our website. Just go to simsburytv.org. You can also see our schedule of programs there. And for updates on when our programs air, you can catch up with us on Twitter or like us on Facebook. And you parents out there, consider taping events at your school to air on SCTV's Education Channel 95. And please join us again next month when we hope to take a closer look at our high school, a show that was originally scheduled for September but was postponed. Thank you. See you next month.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.